We're MUFON 956. We're your local chapter, your local group to explore the unknown. This is our local director, Lillian. Our two local researchers, Violeta and Priscilla. I'm George. I just hang around and talk a lot. We have some great presentation for you all today. We have Mr. Daniel Allen Jones here, and he will be coming up here to present and talk to you all a little bit about something. So without further ado, we're just going to get rolling since we're a little bit off schedule. So here's Mr. Jones.
All right. Hey guys, thanks for being here. I know that everyone's been waiting patiently, so appreciate that a lot. As George said, my name is Daniel, and it's great to see some familiar faces. I'm really just here to introduce the main presentation for today, and I just would like to mention that it's been great to see this group continue to get together. I know that there's a lot that goes into organization with putting things, events on a regular basis. How many of you guys have been to the Edinburgh Festival before? Cool, okay, so if you're not familiar with it, or if you are, but are looking forward to it, it is an annual event, but I'm glad to see that you guys can get together. If you're familiar with, let's see, yeah, I'll use it. So, I do video production on a number of different topics. I have a page called The Vortex. So if you've seen any of my videos, I always say greetings and welcome to The Vortex, but I was just going to say that I feel very welcome by all of you because our speaker and myself, we came all the way down from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's about an 8-hour drive yesterday, so we're really glad to be here with you guys. Thank you. And I also manage a page called the Texas UFO Network. It's on Facebook if you guys are interested in finding out about reports or sightings or events, MUFON-related things or other research. You can definitely check this out. This is at the MUFON Symposium out back in our area earlier back in July. Yeah?
When at January, what will happen?
Well, let's all stay connected so we can find out if something happens. That would be, a good idea, right? So we have a lot of events coming up. Next year, there's the Texas UFO Con. That's going to be in Jefferson, Texas in August. That's out in East Texas. So you can definitely look into that. If you remember from earlier this year, I announced that Giorgio Tsoukalos from Ancient Aliens and World Traveler and Explorer is going to be one of the featured guests at the Edinburgh Festival and Conference next year. The dates are the 4th and 5th of April. It's 2025, of course. And there's not really any other big announcements other than there might be some other people on the radar. A lot of people have been asking about things like the congressional hearings and maybe seeing if Lou Elizondo might be available. So we'll see what we can do. But if you guys have any suggestions, let's stay in touch to see what we can make happen. But I really want to share why I'm here to help let you guys know why we're gathering today to hear about some interesting things from our presenter. John is a buddy of mine. We met actually at our local DFW MUFON group, and he's a licensed professional counselor. He works with a number of different people outside of MUFON, and he has an extensive background and has traveled a lot. He can tell you guys all kinds of things about what he's done before. But one of the things I think was a lot of fun on the drive out, he talked a lot about some of the interesting research that's been done, not just with UFOs, but a lot of other interesting mystery subjects, things like consciousness and other strange ideas that we're looking at, seeing if there are connections between. So it's not only just what we're finding out when it comes to those types of things, but also how it relates to pop culture, multimedia, and a lot of different things. So if you guys are familiar with a lot of different shows, Star Trek and all that kind of stuff, you're really going to enjoy John's work. He's written a number of different publications already, but it's one of those things that you guys are going to really enjoy to hear because MUFON, we're fortunate with this kind of group to be able to have people who are interested in this subject. So it's hard for people to be open about things like UFOs, even to their friends and family, if they don't feel open or comfortable talking about that. But people like John have been able to step up and be involved with this group in a way that can help kind of give us some direction. So he's actually the state director of MUFON here in Texas. And there are, of course, other states and even other countries. But because of Texas being so large, there are a lot of places that have to be covered for field investigators to go out. And so if you guys are interested in being a member of MUFON, getting involved with the organization, or even being a field investigator, being involved here with the local group, or if you're in other areas in Texas or beyond, you can talk to both the MUFON 956 coordinator, Lillian, there, or John, of course, you can explain a lot of other things as well. But I'm glad to be able to share with you guys. We should stay in touch as we continue the discussion afterward to see, what we can come up with for next year. And if you guys have any suggestions on other meetings, topics, events, speakers, anything like that, let's get connected afterward. So without any further ado, I'm very honored to be able to introduce my good friend, John Erik Ege.
I don't know if I can live up to all that. Let's see if I can even do this. Let's see. Is that it? Nope, there goes sometimes. This thing that says you're not crazy. Are you crazy? Sometimes. I think we all are sometimes, right? So as they said, my name's John. I am a licensed counselor here in Texas. The state said I pass sufficient minimum standards to do that thing, and I think I do it pretty good. And I'm fortunate to get to work with a lot of different kinds of folks. But that's not the most important thing about me. I think the most important thing is I have a 10-year-old son, and he's pretty clever, and I love that guy a lot. I have been well-traveled. I worked for American Airlines for 24 years, and that helped do that. And I guess if you want to know about the experiencer stuff, I've been an experiencer all my life. And so that's why I can say you're not crazy for believing in aliens. Now, we could modify that statement and make it more specific. You're not crazy for believing in non-human intelligence. And I hope by the end of this presentation, I will reveal to you that you have access to more than your human state of consciousness, and your normal state of consciousness is not the end-all, be-all of who you are. I think you will find a scientific statement that says we know more about space than we know the depths of the ocean. And I would submit to you that we know more about the depths of the ocean than our subconscious minds. There is so much going on that we don't know, and 90% of our life is driven on autopilot in the unconscious. In terms of mental health, we kind of have this way of, I have this way of looking at things. I determine whether or not you have a mental health problem by looking at functionality. You could have a mental health problem and be perfectly functioning and not need a counselor and not need a doctor, right? But if you're not functioning and you're not able to pay your bills and you're homeless, you're not functioning so well, and that's where we need to step in and help. And if we do this with aliens, you can believe in aliens and be perfectly functioning. And so why they assign that to mental health? Well, I would say that's a governmental stigma that they apply to us to make us not explore what's right here in front of our eyes. So, when it comes to MUFON, we prefer looking at the nuts and bolts. And as a MUFON state director and as a MUFON field investigator, when I'm dealing with MUFON and wearing that particular hat, I have to stick to the nuts and bolts. That does not mean I don't like Bigfoot and the rest of the cryptids. They're on the table. Maybe ghosts are on the table. Archetypes are on the table. That allows me to put some of the paranormal into a Jungian or psychological box that I can help people approach it when they are on a scientific mindset and not a more paranormal and metaphysical mindset. This is the Field Investigator Guide for MUFON. This is the latest edition. It has a lot of science in here, but it also has at least one paranormal aspect. Jacques Vallée, I think everyone knows him? No? Well, Jacques Vallée is the French scientist who studied UFOs. He's also the character who's represented by the French guy in Close Encounters. He created the close encounter scales. Remember close encounters? That's close encounters of the third kind. Well, there's like 5 or 6 of those kinds, each one a little more intense. He also has an anomalous rating scale. And on the anomalous rating scale, you'll find poltergeists, ghost activities, near-death experiences, spiritual experiences. There's just a lot to this. MUFON, the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. This is one of the main reasons I got into MUFON. I've always been into UFOs and the paranormal, But this statement is probably the greatest statement I've ever seen. And you have your hand up. I see you. I'm not ignoring you. What you got?
Once you study aliens, like, do you know about other stuff in the space?
So, I'm a little deaf from too much rock and roll in airplanes. I think you said, are we studying aliens from, what was the rest of it?
No, I said that if you study aliens, do you know about other things?
Do I know about other things too?
Yeah.
I think I know about a few things. I hope to prove at least a little bit of it.
John's got a lot of really good information about a lot of other things.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that it's a little bit harder here in the back, so we're going to see if maybe we can get the mic, but you can,
Okay.
you know,
I'll try and speak up a little. Is that
Yeah.
better? Okay. So, the only other mission statement I know better than this is Star Trek's, where no one else, or to boldly go where no one has gone before. And I'm going to tell you, we're going to have a lot of Star Trek memes, we're going to have other memes, and part of the reason I'm going to introduce these memes is to reveal to you that we're all connected in a certain way, and then I can highlight parts of your brain and we can all share in a paradigm. All right? I'm also testing you. I'm going to see what you know and what you don't know. It's not a pass-fail test. It's just kind of a test. And so, I didn't hear you?
I said there's prizes for getting it right.
Oh, there's prizes for getting it right. Oh, I didn't know about that. MUFON does investigate stuff, and they do hear about Bigfoot. And what is this, 22? This was on the front page of one of their journals. So, it's not that we don't talk about paranormal, it's just that we study UFOs with MUFON, and some of these things will be shifted over to people that better understand and practice the paranormal. All right? But since we got Bigfoot here, let me introduce how I came about coming to him. That's Steve Austin from the $6 Million Man. Any of you guys are old enough to remember that like me? You remember this fella? Spock. Also In Search Of. Do you remember watching In Search Of Bigfoot? Yeah. What's interesting about this is, in this episode of $6 Million Man, they introduced this tunnel concept. Who else has heard of a tunnel of light? Or going through a tunnel of light? Yeah. If you know you're in near-death experiences, you're going to come across this. And maybe there's a lot of overlap, and fiction shares all of these things because these are just things that are in our heads as archetypes or memes. I hope this is better. Can you hear me back there?
hold it close.
Hold it close. There we go. And so maybe these are in our stories because they're part of our psyche. That's a good explanation. Or maybe there's more to life that we all know, but we come here and we kind of forget it while we practice in our cultures, in our paradigm. Right, this is that anomalous rating scale, which I mentioned, that has Jack Delay in it. Leslie King, who helped break the UFO story in 2017, wrote this UFO book, and Surviving Death. And so she's also interested in near-death experiences, and she's also made the connection that they may be related. I'm going to give you more evidence for that as we go along. All right, you ready for a pop quiz?
Yeah.
All right. What is that?
Enterprise.
Okay.
Star Trek.
It is Star Trek. Mm-hmm.
A.
Now, are you sure that it's the Enterprise?
Yeah. Well, I can't see the numbers.
Yes.
Well, there you go. What,
I think that's like
you think that's like an alien? I do too. So what's different about this particular picture of what we think is the Enterprise, or we at least acknowledge it's Star Trek? You notice a difference?
And the cells are different color.
Yep, the nacelles are a little different. We don't have anything written on it that helps us identify this, but I would agree that this is Star Trek, right? I would also, because I know a little bit about this, I would say I would have to ask you as field investigators to give me more information. So if you're a field investigator, I need to know what type of ship this is. This is the Ambassador-class starship. It came from between Kirk and before the Next Generation Enterprise D. So this is the Enterprise C, and it is the Enterprise. The first time we see it is Cause and Effect with Fraser. You guys know Fraser? Well, he plays a psychiatrist who's on a radio station. And then this is the captain that's in the episode Enterprise C. I think it's Enterprise C. And this is the psychiatrist saying, I'm listening, which is something that I would convey if I was doing this. So I've had people submit the picture of an Enterprise saying, this is exactly what I think I saw to MUFON. Now, what if they just saw the saucer and they added the rest up to it? Maybe they didn't see the full thing. This image is connected to a story that back when Columbus was coming over and he approached the Americas, that the Native Americans that were on the beach couldn't tell that there were ships coming towards them. All they saw was clouds, except for one person, the shaman. The shaman knew something was off, and it took him a moment, and he sat there on the beach for like hours or days until it came into resolution and he understood. And he conveyed to the folks, this is probably not going to be good for them. What is this? Do you guys recognize this picture? Well, this is the name of the photo is the Madonna with the Saint, and it's from 1487. So, but what's interesting is there's a UFO in the picture. You guys see the UFO? This has probably been shown on Ancient Aliens and some other documentaries that suggest that there's UFO artifacts in our photos. What's particularly interesting on this one is there's a guy seeing it and his dog is seeing it. So do dogs hallucinate? Actually, dogs can hallucinate, but would they hallucinate what we see? And the question I always like to interject with Star Trek, why does God need a starship? That's from the Star Trek movie. All right, this is the statistical manual that I use to determine if you have a mental illness. Normally I would ask, this is a diagnostic manual for disorders. Do you think it defines normality? No, it does not define what normal is. There is no defined normal because every culture has a different set of normals. So some things are relative. Now we do have some stuff that are consistently reliable across boards, but not everything is normal. What you got?
Can I ask you ask the questions over there?
I do. Thank you for noticing that. So, what is crazy? What is normal? Do dogs see God? And I refer you back to that picture with the... And I'm glad you... Who taught you how to read? I'm happy you can read.
I learned how to spell yes when I was like 3 years old.
That's impressive.
It's easy.
It's easy?
Yeah.
So what is crazy is defined by this book, but I'll tell you some stories. We also create crazy in our head. So for example, you guys know what shaky leg syndrome is? There's a condition where people who are nervous will shake their legs, and 1% of the population had this. Until the pharmaceuticals started advertising to give you drugs for this condition, and then suddenly 20% of the population had this disease. And so we can make ourselves sick, which is an interesting phenomenon in and of itself. We're back to my continuum here, and I'm going to try and connect some ideas. Do anybody recognize anyone up here? Raise your hand if you recognize anyone. I'll just go through it then. We'll start over here.
The lady below right there from Ghost, the Ghost Whisperer.
Thank you. That's the Ghost Show. I don't remember. Jennifer Loveula? Yeah. Yep. So this movie here would be an example of the worst case of schizophrenia. This movie is called The Soloist. It's got Jamie Foxx in it and Robert Downey Jr. This is the worst case scenario for someone with schizophrenia. They end up being homeless on the street, but he was a famous professional cellist who actually did perform at concert level performing. He was considered a genius, but he also had schizophrenia to such a degree that he couldn't function. and he ended up being homeless. It's a great movie. I recommend seeing it. And Robert Downey Jr.'s character is trying to save him. All right. If we go up here to A Beautiful Mind, this is a better outcome that if you go with the story of John Nash, who was a PhD student, he had schizophrenia so badly that his daughter would have perished had his wife not intervened. Because he thought people were out to get him. He was so paranoid that he just put himself in bad situations, let's say that. But he was also so smart that he convinced everyone that his reality was true, and they believed that he was actually a spy working with the government to solve mysteries. And this is the best case scenario in the sense that his illness gave him the ability to solve a math problem that no one could solve. He ended up winning a Nobel Peace Prize for that. And he ended up being able to see through his illness, which is something that's very hard to do. And he figured it out because he, at the end of the show, it's like, oh, my hallucinations haven't aged in 20 years. They're the same. You're very lucky if you can perceive past your hallucinations to discover that your brain has been playing tricks on you. So imagine you're having an REM sleep dream. But when you wake up, one of the characters from the dreams follows you. That's what an hallucination is like. Your brain is actively engaging a part of your brain that sleeps, and you're seeing something that is not there. And I would submit to you that everything you see is actually a hallucination based on the research that says what you see was perceived anywhere from 80 milliseconds to 10 whole seconds prior to you consciously being aware of it. The studies are very clear on this. They put people in an fMRI, they ask them to make a decision, and the people running the test know what you've decided before you are consciously aware that you've made a decision. It freaks people out. It bothers me, because consider that. 1, 2, 3. You're now aware of something that happened 3 seconds. That's a long time. I mean, if you're driving a car, 3 seconds is a huge thing. Here's another continuum. Healthy brains that were damaged sometimes result in this thing called idiot-savant syndrome, where someone with no artistic ability or no musical talent suddenly manifests concert-level ability to play the piano, or they become great painters, right? This man, Daniel Brinkley, and there's another story here, and if you guys want references, they're attached to this, just ask Lillian for this, and she'll give it to you. They were struck by lightning, and they went from normal everyday life to being able to be psychic and interact with spirits and what have you. And they had near-death experiences, and almost everyone with near-death experiences reports some kind of psychic ability after their experience. Allan Kardec introduced the word mediumship. He started the Spiritist movement, and he's well known in Brazil. And he goes over here closer to Edgar Cayce. You all know Edgar Cayce? Edgar Cayce is the American sleeping prophet. He would go to sleep and come up with answers. He would sleep on his books, and he'd wake up with all the knowledge in the book that he slept on. It's pretty impressive. This is Richard Martini and Jennifer Schaefer. They are Jennifer Schaefer is a psychic, a medium, and she works with this producer who has his own YouTube channel, and they talk to the deceased, mostly celebrities. And so you might want to find his show. What I would say is different between Jennifer Schaefer, seeing things and hearing things that most people don't, and the soloist, Jamie Foxx's character, is functionality. She's feeding her family, she's making appointments, she's doing everything she needs to function. The soloist guy was barely getting food, as he's on the streets. And so, you can have a mental health problem and still have a UFO experience. It doesn't mean you're crazy. This is an interesting story here. Van Dusen, who talks about Swedenborg, who was a prominent scientist and a spiritualist back in the day. What's interesting about this is that he was a clinical psychologist interviewing people at asylums, and he was interviewing the hallucinations. And the hallucinations were grade levels above the people he was interviewing. To such a degree that the person he's talking to, the person, would hear what the hallucination would say, and they would say, like, well, I don't understand that. And he said, well, just tell me what they said and I'll translate it for you. And so they would be giving him like regular college level stuff, and these people are so problematic that they didn't get above 6th grade, and they just didn't understand what they were talking about. So this doctor had conversations with a hallucination via the person who hallucinates. That's interesting to me, because that means either that hallucination is real, or the person who's doing the hallucinating has the information in their brain, they just don't know how to access it. Could be both. All right, and so I put them on a continuum to show the difference between not functioning and functioning, not crazy, not crazy. Does that make sense? You ever seen a bird fly with one wing? No. What happens if it folds up its wing? Thank you. We need both the left and right to fly. We need both the left hemisphere and right hemisphere to function. Left hemisphere. Let's go to, oh, here's the cat. If you ever put a cucumber down on the floor and watch your cat react to it? Just scare your cat. So, where is it? Here we go. Left hemisphere of the brain does all the math, the English, the language, unless you're left-handed, and then it flips. And then the right hemisphere is artistic. We need both of these to function. Most people assign emotions to this side and reasoning on that side. We need both to function. This is a famous experiment. They put fleas in a jar. Fleas can jump out of the jar. But if you put the lid on it, they start bumping their head on the jar. After a while, they learn not to jump into the lid because they don't like bumping their heads. And so they took the lid off after they learned this, and none of the fleas would leave the jar. All right. All of us are conditioned by our paradigm to respond to the things that we know, and we ignore the things we don't know. So we've learned to jump within our paradigm. That's what I'm trying to suggest with this. What's interesting is even the children fleas would not jump higher than their parents. In order to break the paradigm, we have to introduce to our children new concepts so that they can see what we don't see. And you guys see this in your everyday life. How many of your kids can work your remote controls better than you? Exactly. Exactly. Multiple personality disorder is something that interests me because when you put people that have this disorder into an fMRI and you measure their physiology, when their personality changes, their physiology changes. If you have a personality that is nearsighted, that needs glasses, and you switch to a personality that doesn't need glasses, the eye changes shapes to a normal eye. You have to take the glasses off in order to see. This is documented stuff. It interests me because we also have this thing called a placebo. I can give you a sugar pill and tell you it's going to work. I'm not allowed to do that because it's considered unethical. But if I told you it worked and you took the sugar pill and you believed it, you get well. All right? That means your physiology changed because of a belief. What if the belief is actually a personality change? You change from one personality that has the illness and then to a personality that doesn't have the illness. Maybe that's why hypnosis works, and hypnosis has been shown to heal people spontaneously, usually connected to a past life experience. Oh, I remember a past life, I got shot in the shoulder, that's why my arm hurts, and after that the arm ceases to hurt. What you got?
So if I hit my head and I said, what happened? What's going on with my brain?
That's a good question. What's going on with your brain right now? Are you learning?
It's getting 100 pounds. I cannot hold it anymore.
You can't hold it no more, it's full. Or maybe we can make a big bubble so you can have some more.
It's full with knowledge.
It's so much knowledge. Well, now we're going to cut your brain in half.
Okay.
Okay, so this brain was severed it's a procedure that they did for people with epilepsy. Some people had epilepsy so severe that they would die if they had a severe attack. And to stop it, so what it is, epilepsy is like a lightning storm, and it would start at one center of the brain and it would take over the whole brain, and they wouldn't be able to function. And they thought if I cut the brain in half, I could save them from dying because it would only go through half the brain. All right? Well, it was interesting in the sense that when they cut the brain in half, I want to make sure you understand this, the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. The right side controls the left side.
I already know that.
You know that. But now, do you know this? They were able to talk to the left brain, and the left brain had a different personality compared to the right brain. Two totally radical different personalities. Now, when it's connected, we only have our one personality. But when you separate them, we get two different people. And it's just bizarre that we don't understand this. And they were pretty clever to figure out how to talk to them. They put these lenses in the eye that cut off half of the eye, because the left side of the eye goes to the right side and the right side goes to the left side. And so they had to do this visually by putting words up on the screen, and they'll put like a saw on the screen over here and a hammer over here, and they'd ask the left side of the brain, well, what do you see? The brain would say, I see a hammer. But the right side would say, I see the saw. And they'd ask the brain, well, the left, who still uses the mouth, why are you saying you saw a hammer when you saw a saw? And the brains couldn't figure it out. The experimenters knew. You can find this information in the book, Who's in Charge? By Michael Kazanica. It's a pretty good book on neuroscience. All of that to say, do you see what you know, or do you see what you see? Did you know Russians see more color blue than we do? It's not because their eyes are better, it's not because their brains are better, but because they have more words for blue, and they sort blue to a greater distinction than most other countries. And there are lots of things that different cultures see that other cultures just ignore. Are you ready to continue? That's a lot of information, and we're just packed full.
Okay.
And here's another quiz. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Q.
Yay!
Who answered?
Say that? Louder. No, that's not Elon Musk. That's John Delancey. He played Q in Star Trek. You guys watch Star Trek? You watch Star Trek?
No, I just raised
What's your question?
I have a question. Well,
I have to get closer. I can't hear you. Speak up.
well, what if you take your brain out and then this side is still working and you can still move your body?
You can. So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. That's brilliant. So when they cut the brain in half, they left the brainstem, and so the top part of the brain would talk to the lower part of the brain, which would still control the body. And so if they took the right side, let's say they take the right side out, which they have done, like if there's a tumor, they would take that out, but the body would adjust to controlling the whole body on the left side. Sometimes for a while, the left side of the body is paralyzed. Sometimes they regain recovery because the other side starts taking over. sometimes you're paralyzed for life. And it depends on how much brain they take out and what's left of the lower half, the portion of the brain. That's a great question. I like Q. It's my favorite character on Star Trek. Who's this? You guys watch James Bond? This is also Q. Okay. Now, there is a connection here. I'm not just kind of crazy, lightning, all tangential, but we're going to get there slowly. Ian Fleming wrote the James Bond series. He also wrote this book called Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Are anyone familiar with that? All right. The car is a djinn, a genie. That's not Genesis 11 on the license plate. There was a djinn that was powering and making the car magical and responsive. All right? There's a story that Ian Fleming was actually a spy. He's probably aware of UFOs, and there's some evidence that jinn are part of this phenomenon. And he put it into this car, and we wonder if this was misdirection or he's trying to tell us something and get us ready for future knowledge, which might explain why Q and this Q gets information from somewhere to create these great inventions, and Q from Star Trek is a lot like a djinn. He's that powerful that he's not he's a non-corporal being that's able to do anything he wants. All right. You can see for yourself, there's some evidence that this is based on a true story, but it may not be what this guy thinks. So there's some other car information and spy information in this book that's really interesting. You guys know these fellows? Yeah. Men in black. They're pretty scary, aren't they? No?
Is that
They're
the
not scary?
police?
Yeah. So, what are they?
Police.
Are they aliens? Are they robots? Are they something else?
Yeah.
Yeah. They could be archetypes for all I know. Archetypes. Oh, go ahead.
Maybe Yoda.
You think they're robots?
They're like workers for like the government's like look for like aliens, alien babies, stuff like that.
There's some evidence for that, isn't there? You read all our UFO books? No? You just know. Maybe you hear people talking about it. I did too. Isn't that a great movie? Yes.
Is that Baby Yoda?
I think you're
That is Baby
CIA.
Yoda. So we're about to talk about metaphors and how our movie characters are also archetypes for stories. You guys know The Wizard of Oz? Right? Do you know Star Wars? Luke Skywalker. Did you know these two characters are the same character? All right, you ready for a ride? Roller coaster time.
Yay!
All right. Luke Skywalker and Dorothy are both found on a farm with their aunt and uncle. We don't know what's happened to their parents at the beginning of this movie. All right. They both go on a journey where they find a spiritual leader, a sorcerer or a witch, to tell them that the power is within them, not external to them. All right. Obi-Wan and Glenda are the same characters. They're archetypes. Luke and Dorothy are on the hero's journey. They both go and find friends along the way. Han Solo and the Cowardly Lion, they're the same character, always running away from a fight. C-3PO, Tin Man, that's the same character. R2-D2 and Toto, same character. They're both run for help, but they don't speak a lick of English. Can you imagine the witch, who is Darth Vader? Ruby lightsaber, ruby slippers. She might go to Dorothy and say, Glenda didn't tell you what happened to your mother, did she? Well, join me and we can rule Emerald City as mother and daughter. Well, the Oz character, I think, is the evil emperor. Who else would send a 9-year-old girl to kill a witch unless you need a new apprentice and you got to start them early? Right? Yoda, never your mind on where you were or what you were doing. Adventure, over the rainbow. Jedi's great, not these things. Tell me.
I'm 9 years old too.
Huh?
I'm 9 years old too.
You're 9 years old too?
Yeah.
Are we going to change your name to Dorothy? Are you on the hero's journey? Anyone know who this fellow is? All right, this is Gary Nolan. He's been getting downloads. He's talked about it, and he's working with helping the Disclosure Project through the Saul Institute. I recommend following up on this guy because he's been interviewing people that supposedly are experiencers, and he finds there's artifacts in our brain that show trauma, and these trauma places are consistent with people who have experiences. So there may be a way to know who's experiencers and who's not. Holographic Universe, Michael Talbot. This book came out, I can't even remember, but it's over 20 years, probably the 80s or early 90s. And he's talking about something like the Matrix before there was a Matrix movie. We may be in a Matrix or a dream world. Which would be interesting because our psychology and our understanding of ourselves changes if this is not who we are. If we're not physical beings, right? Changes whether or not UFOs are nuts and bolts, or there's more consciousness aspect to them, or spiritual qualities. You know this gentleman. This is Mr. Fox. He did the latest documentary was Moment of Contact, where he made a documentary on the Brazil UFO crash and the aliens that more than one civilian saw. He's kind of this guy. That's an old TV meme movie. And again, I'm introducing these memes because there's some connections here. Who's this? Mulder from the X-Files. All right, you guys remember the X-Files? Some of the characters in there are kind of interesting, and they remind me of memes. And there are pictures in ufology, and I'm like, is that where that came from? Like this guy. This is a 1939 picture of a man smoking a cigarette, and there's a UFO in the background. Is this the cigarette man from the X-Files? UFOs go back to at least 1939. The whistleblower David Grush says that our UFOs go back to at least 1930s with Italy. What if World War II wasn't about Hitler, but about chasing UFO technology? What if the Cold War was chasing UFO technology? All right, there's the cigarette man. And a quote from Helen Keller: "A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers." You should be asking questions, like this girl here. What you got?
I know at my school, I test about Helen Keller.
You tested about her? What's interesting about Helen Keller to me is that she was deaf and dumb, which means she couldn't hear, she couldn't see.
I know that.
Yeah. You guys know how they got a breakthrough with her? She was essentially the same level as a feral animal. She had no conscious thought until the first word was introduced to her. The woman that educated her took her hand, poured water over her hand, drew the letter W on her hand. She repeated this process until Helen got it. And she, in her own words, would tell you it was like a light went off in her head. Every word in your head is a light. It activates something. Every character activates something. And so I submit to you that television has been self-disclosure. And I'm going to give you more evidence for that as we go through this. Yes, ma'am?
Helen Keller, she learned other kinds of words.
She learned a lot of words. She became a great writer.
She was the first and deaf person to get a college degree.
I did not know that. Did you hear that? Helen Keller was the first person to get a college degree who was blind and deaf. Isn't that interesting? Thank you for that information. So, this picture of a flying saucer in 1942 in China. She's pointing at it. Lots of people in this picture were seeing the UFO. Everybody and their dog was seeing this UFO. Who's this? You guys know?
No.
Kenneth Arnold, thank you. So that's the UFO he says he saw. He didn't see a flying saucer per se. They say that he said it skipped across the air like a flying saucer, and that term stuck. And they say it stuck because of him, but I'm suggesting to you that flying saucers have been around since at least the Roman era. They were seeing flaming shields, saucers. We just saw the 1942 picture, and so they've been seeing saucers, but the term stuck because of this incident. There's that flying saucer again, and the dog seeing it. Do you see what I see? Is a book by Russell Targ. He was a remote viewer. He started the remote viewing program for the government. What that means is the U.S. government recruited people to be psychic spies. They were using their minds to spy on the Russians, and they found UFOs and aliens too. Of course, they couldn't confirm that, but the most interesting thing that they did to prove it to science, and science still dismissed it, we sent a probe to go see Jupiter. Ingo Swann, in his mind, went to Jupiter first, and he says, I must be at the wrong place because I see rings here. And NASA made fun of him. Oh, he's seeing rings, like he's just making this up. No one knew that there were rings around Jupiter until that probe arrived at Jupiter. It had a ring. How did Ingo Swann know that? Yes, ma'am.
Once I grow older, I'll grab a telescope and I'll look at the space and I'll check every planet and see if it has rings.
I don't even think you can see it with our telescopes, but I like telescopes too. Yeah, we can see the Saturn one has rings, for sure. They probably can do it with the James Webb. I bet that's true. This is Jack Parson, not Alan Parsons' project. He worked for NASA, and he's associated with helping NASA create a lot of stuff, but he is also into the occult. Who's this? I Dream of Jeannie. So, NASA and Jinn may go together. They may have put this comedy together to confuse us or make fun of us if we drew the connection. This is Chris Bledsoe. You're familiar with him? His first UFO experience was given to MUFON, and he witnessed orbs and what looked like non-corporeal entities that were presenting themselves as the ancient gods of Egypt. All right? He's been on podcasts recently, and he named the NASA guy, the top NASA guy, I don't remember his name, but his name is included in American Cosmic. There's a pseudonym for him in American Cosmic, but his name has been released since then. And the NASA guy says everyone who's been into space has brought something back, like a poltergeist, like a skinwalker, like a light, or like a djinn. They've known about this stuff since the beginning. And everything we send into space has a prayer written in ancient Latin that's put on a plaque, it's put on the UFO. And the doctor that wrote that book, American Cosmic, asked, why are you doing this? And he says, I don't know, it's probably for them. And she says, what do you mean them? He says, you know, them. This is the lady that wrote American Cosmic. And this is Russell Targ with his cat. This is Chris Bledsoe's book, UFO of God. I recommend it. Russell Targ is also an icon that you didn't even know was put in your head. Watch Ghostbusters? This is supposed to be Russell Targ. TV is educating us. We're being programmed. It's called television programming. So this one? Do you see dead people? No? Yes?
Once like at night or at the daytime, I usually see like a shadow picture, like all black, and then it goes there, and then 1 second goes closer.
That's me going to the fish get water.
Oh. That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Were you scared?
No, I'm like,
That's kind of a scare face. So maybe psychics are real, mediums are real. I don't know if they're real, but do you know who this is? This is one of Maria Orsic, who channeled aliens for the Nazis so that they could create UFO technology. They were channeling aliens. This was her symbol. Looks like the same symbol in an episode of Star Trek.
What does it mean?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know what it means. Or are they just putting it in our head? I don't know. This alien interview book, I do see you. Can I come back to you? Thank you. This alien interview book is a really interesting book. This nurse supposedly was telepathically connected to one of the aliens at Roswell, and they kept her around because the alien was speaking to her. That's the symbol of the domain. The alien said that it was from the domain. Does anyone recognize that symbol?
You mean the signal from Star Trek?
It looks like it's from Star Trek. That's what I see. I could be wrong. But then again, what do you think? Is it Star Trek? Or am I making it up? Why is the US military copying the Star Trek symbol? That's for real, folks. Trump made Space Force real, and they adopted this symbol that I can't see anything but Star Trek. Aliens are real, per Haim Eshed, the Israeli Space Defense Minister, who's retired. He says there is a galactic federation and that we are too primitive for the aliens to introduce themselves to at this time. And he says our government is in cahoots with aliens. Galactic Federation, Star Trek symbols. All right, this is the Chinese probe that landed on the moon. This is their symbol. Tell me that doesn't look like Star Trek? Yes, ma'am.
is there anything like what if like a 2025 or 2026 or more? Will like scientists discover other things in space other than aliens?
I think they're going to find so much in space that we can't even fill it up with all the books in the world. There's so much stuff to know and discover. Yeah, I think you're thinking right. You guys know this one? It's one of my favorites. Jimmy Stewart, and the movie is Harvey. He has a 6-foot invisible rabbit. I recommend the movie. It's very entertaining and it's soft, and it might help you look at mental health in a different way. Mental health is what I do. This is a version of Harvey that was pretty scary. I don't recommend it as much, but it does have some interesting concepts in it, including time travel. Do you see what's in this picture here? How many see the number in this one? Do you see the face in the farm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody can see the number. We all perceive things differently. This is one of those magic windows thing, and if you cross your eyes just right, the Enterprise might jump out at you. But all of that to demonstrate that we don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain. There's also this thing called collapsing the wave plummet. It's a physics thing. If a particle goes through a slit, or a wave goes through a slit, it takes an observer to make it either a wave, and if it's a wave, you get this interference pattern. If it's a particle, you'll get a hit on one of these two sides of the screen, not both. Does that make sense to you, what I'm describing? A particle is like a one baseball hitting the wall, it leaves a mark. If it's a wave, it leaves these patterns or lines on the wall, right? You don't get both, and you only get what you get once you've observed it. One does not become enlightened imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is something Carl Jung said. If you want to be enlightened, you run towards the shadow because the light's on the other side. Crazy Like Us is a book that shows all the illnesses that were psychosomatic that was given to us. Bright-sided shows you can be too positive. We need a little bit of negativity to function. You need a left and a right. Imagine you're on a seesaw, a teeter-totter. They don't have those anymore, do they? Do these kids know what a teeter-totter is?
They're too dangerous.
Yeah, well, imagine being on one. and one side's negative and one side's positive. You're up in the air on the positive side, you're up. But you don't like negativity, and you cut the middle of the board so you have none. What happens when you cut the middle of the board? You fall on your ass. Can you learn to see and hear what others? Absolutely. I believe, and the research on remote viewing is clear, you can learn to remote view. I think you can learn to speak to the dead. I think you can learn to speak to your subconscious. Would you like to know how?
Yeah.
Let's start with this book, Think and Grow Rich. #1 self-help book in the world. And Daniel, if I'm running out of time, you let me know. Okay. This book was written in the 1930s, and he was teaching people how to be rich, but he put a crazy chapter in there called the Invisible Counselor Technique. It teaches you how to create an invisible friend by soliciting someone you like Einstein. If you want answers on smart answers, you invite Einstein to come be your invisible friend, and Einstein would give you answers that only Einstein could give you. Now, he thought it was just a psychological trick, and that your brain has enough information to kind of give you what you think Einstein would say. Yes, ma'am?
So if I didn't create imaginary friend, then I would say, hi grandma, and then she must be.
So, is grandma alive? Has grandma passed? Yeah. You miss your grandmother, don't you? Yeah, I miss mine. That makes sense. If you imagine what your grandmother would say, would you be able to hear her voice in your head? Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah, can you repeat what you said right before, what's his name?
Napoleon Hill, he created a technique called the Invisible Counselor Technique. It's chapter 14 in this book. I'm not making this up. You can Google it on YouTube and find the instructions on how to do this and hear about his experience. I'm going to tell you about mine in here in a second. Before we do, I want to introduce you to this next book, Magic and Mystery in Tibet. All right, Alexander David Neal. And you can get a copy of the book list and all this stuff too. I'll let you have the PowerPoint. Alexandra David Neal in the 1930s was the first woman anthropologist allowed to go to Tibet. The monks liked her because she knew more about Buddhism than anyone in the West, and they just really liked her. And so she was invited to go, and she went there, and she discovered a concept called topos. Topos is a thought form, which is kind of like having an invisible friend. That's not why the Tibetan monks created this practice. They wanted to help people overcome fear. And so, for example, let's say you're afraid of spiders. They don't want you to be afraid of spiders, so they would have you meditate on spiders so often, so persistently, that you would hallucinate spiders crawling on you. I wouldn't want to do that, but they did that. And once they overcame their fear of spiders, they dissolved the spiders and they went away. Well, Alexandra David Neal said, can I make a person? And they said, yeah, don't do that. Well, I'd like to, and they said, no ma'am, we don't want you to do this. And so they left her thinking she's going to play by the rules, and she said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make a Friar Tuck companion. She thought, Friar Tuck, he's part of the order, he'd be all right, but she forgot he's also a bit of a rascal. That's why he's with Robin Hood and the Merry Men. And he started causing her mischief. What's interesting is the community, the village that she lived in, were experiencing Friar Tuck as well. He was causing the whole village problems, and the monks had to come in and make Friar Tuck go away. Yeah, other people witness this, so it may not just be an invisible friend. It may be something else, and or We have a collective unconscious, which is something Carl Jung spoke into being. Maybe we share things. Maybe we share archetypes. And we share it greater than just verbal transmission. This is the Red Book by Carl Jung. He has this technique called the active imagination technique where he talks to the subconscious. Using his process and recorded in this book, he invented or found his spirit guide named Philemon. I'm submitting to you that these three practices are all the same. We're just calling it different names. And interestingly enough, some of this stuff all came about in the 1930s. I find that interesting too. You may not recognize this picture, but this is an iconic picture. You can put it in your head. There's this experiment called Philip the Ghost Experiment. Some of these are scientists, a couple of them are mediums. The scientists wanted to know if these mediums were real or fake. And so they created a fake ghost. They gave him a fake history. His name was Philip. When the mediums got a hold of their assignment, let's go and do this, they channeled Philip. And Philip answered all the questions the way that he would, based on the way the scientists invented them. So did they tap into Philip? Is Philip a new entity? Is he a topa? I don't know how to answer these questions. And I don't think the mediums know, but they didn't know that it was an experiment. They just knew that they asked them to find Philip, and they found Philip. And he answered the questions exactly the way he was written. What if every fictional character you've ever read is real and in your head? Contact, the CE5 protocol. What if you go out with Stephen Greer thinking you're going to contact aliens, and you use this protocol that is the same protocol as the Invisible Friends, and you're calling something else? I don't know that that's true. I'm not trying to scare anyone. It could be that we're calling something from our mind, or we're tapping telepathically to something that's there. I don't know how to answer these questions, and I don't think anyone's exploring them well enough for us to get good answers. But we're doing it. Yes, ma'am.
I wish I had like a telescope, so that way I could see into space and then explore different things.
I wish I could too. I used to have a telescope.
You have it?
It got stolen off my back porch. You guys know what this is? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And I'm not saying do this or don't do this. I'm just saying that this is something that has been used to supposedly contact others. I think you're exploring your subconscious, and your subconscious will communicate with you. Kind of reminds me of a heart. Kind of reminds me of this pyramid. Right? It's got the eye. Right? Yeah. Kind of reminds me of that. A communicator. This is Loxy. This is the best representation I have of using AI art of what my own invisible topa or spirit guide looks like. You can take a picture, it's okay. I practiced this, I got her, and she told me to go back to Think and Grow Rich and do the invisible counselor technique. You want to meet my team? All right. Before I get there, I want to tell you about the lightning. This reminds me of that thing from Maria Orsic, all right? And that's why it's here. It also reminds me of the Star Trek thing. The first words I heard Loxy speak, as well as I'm hearing you speak to me, is I asked her for directions to go from point A to point B so I could solve this problem, and I didn't want to be tangential, because I'm pretty tangential, I'm all over the place. And I said, so get me here straight. And she said, lightning never takes a straight path, and it lights the whole sky. I came out of my chair. There's no one in the room, and I'm like, did I really hear that? Did I make it up? Is that something the Persian poets would say? Rumi, Hafiz. This image is in the movie Joe versus the Volcano. The opening of the movie, Joe, played by Tom Hanks, walks this path. All right? This is the symbol on the door. It's the symbol on his logo for work. It's the symbol or the pattern that the lightning took to sink your boat. All right? There's Maria Orsic's book again. You can see Radio Picture put it into their symbol. When one of the characters broke his wall, that pattern appeared in the wall. And it's the picture, oh, did I pass it? It's also the path he took up the volcano, to jump into the volcano. I recommend Joe versus the Volcano. You can watch it for free on YouTube. It's a really interesting movie. And now that you have the pattern to look for, you know that they're giving you a program. Here's Loxy, these symbols, and this is my invisible team. You know who the far left is? It's Carl Jung. I invited Tesla. I figured if I'm going to have a smart guy, it better be Tesla, because even Einstein said Tesla's the smartest guy in the world. Jackie Chan. I figured I need strength, but I need it tempered with wisdom, or tempered with humor, because humor helps wisdom with the strength. I invited her because I figured, well, it's Star Trek, and I wanted to see if there's a difference between a fictional character and someone who's alive or dead. There's no difference. Sacagawea and the goddess Isis, who often comes to me as a cat. Let's see. Oh, wait. Let's go back. I didn't see the cat. Oh, there's the cat. Mr. Spock calling him. And in that episode, the cat is named Isis, which is interesting. All these things were created in dreams. We dismiss our dreams too much. DNA molecule was discovered in a dream. Einstein's relativity, he was floating on a boat out in the lake. Oh, is that how it works? He went and wrote it down. Frankenstein came from a dream. The periodic table, he didn't know how to order the things, and he went to a dream and he shuffled the cards and there they were. The structure of the atom from a dream. The Terminator came from a dream. And lots of things come from dreams. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Albert Einstein. You want to do a little bit more, or are we tired? More? Okay. Telepathy. Is it biological, spiritual, or technology? What if it's all of it? There's a device they created that you can put in your ear. It's an earbud, and they can read your mind. They can tell if you're paying attention at work, looking for dresses on a shopping thing, gossiping with your colleague. This technology is here. Imagine AI can read our minds with the. They can record dreams. Where's that? I think that's the next one. I'll come to it. The Japanese can put you in an fMRI while you're sleeping. They can record your brain, and they can turn your brain signal into a recording, and they can see what you were dreaming. Now, imagine AI is real, and then they say within 12 years it will be sentient, and they use AI, and they can figure out what our brain's doing and know what we're thinking or doing in advance. They know what we're going to decide in advance, up to 10 seconds in advance. And they said that AI will be sentient in the next 12 years. The military is always 50 to 100 years more advanced than civilian tech. They already have this stuff. What if some of those ships are actually AI flying around, and they're recording our brains and trying to see what we're doing and thinking because they can read our minds? And all the aliens who are talking to us telepathically. Go back to, what was the one in aerial school in Africa? The kids all report that was telepathic communication. Yes, ma'am?
What's it called?
I'm not sure I'm hearing you. Oh, do they test telepathy on other people? Well, that goes right to this question here. So, Stanley Krippner did an ESP test at a Grateful Dead concert. He wanted to know if while playing music in the background, and they posted some pictures on the background, could people dreaming pick up the same transmission? And he has evidence to support that it does. Sheldrake says that there is a sense that humans have where people know they're being stared at. And he's also done some other psi research. There's evidence for psi. There's a lot of evidence for psi. Here's the Japanese scientist can record your dream. It's real tech, it's here. Right, Real Magic by Dean Radin. He talks about his research. He was part of the Psychic Spy program, the Stargate program. He even has a little experiment in here if you want to try magic yourself. This stuff is real. I don't know that it's magic per se. That may be the wrong language. We're all connected consciously, and what we believe changes our reality. As I said, you can make yourself sick, you can make yourself well. That's been demonstrated psychosomatically, placebos, hypnosis. Again, Russell Targ, I recommend his book. This is Ingo Swann. He was one of the psychic spies. This is a list of his books. He talks about the aliens that he's met in California and stuff, and penetration. You guys want to go a little further? We're almost done. Who's this?
Monkey.
Did I hear Lucy? Hey, Lucy. This is Lucy. Lucy. Lucy may have been our ancestor. You know what this is? It's a famous UFO sighting. Anyone recognize it?
A diamond?
All right. Daniel, go ahead.
Go for it, John.
This is the Cash Landrum UFO, where people in Houston were irradiated by this low-flying UFO that was surrounded by military helicopters and was the first civilian to sue the U.S. government for being exposed to radiation. And the military got out of it by saying, we don't have any craft like that. There's another diamond ship. It's another famous UFO photo. You guys familiar with that? You know who this is? He invented this concept called the 20 and Back program, where people would go and participate with the secret space force. They would live out 20 years of service. They would regress them in age, put them back in the timeline, erase their memory, and they'd live their life without any compensation for being in the military. And he says it's a real thing. And as soon as he started publishing, other people started popping up, said, yeah, I'm part of the program too. And he's like, you can't do that. This is copyrighted. It's mine. I'm here to tell you today, he didn't create this. And I'm going to give you the evidence for it. This picture is associated with the Beatles. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. You know what movie that was in? The Yellow Submarine. You know that one? It's not the Yellow Submarine, but it was part of... You ever wonder why they made all submarines yellow? I recommend you watch this music video of just the Yellow Submarine. It has everything that's in the 20 and Back program. It has time travel. The submarine is a trans-medium craft. It goes in the water, underwater, in the air, in space, through time. That's exactly what we're looking at with UFOs. They had people on the moon prior to the 1960s. The secret space force was in space before the 1960s. The people on the ship age, they get old. They get regressed. How is that not the 20 and Back program? And mind you, this movie came out in 1968. Way before 20 and Back program. They go into space and they go back in time and they fight the reptiles. The reptilians are part of that story. The blue meanies, in near-death experience, they are the medic, or the spiritual healers. In ufology, the blue people are the medics. That's interesting to me. I don't know why the 7th Cavalry was in it. They were a bunch of scoundrels, but somehow they're tied to the Yellow Submarine movie. Don't know why the captain was crying. I don't know what he did, but I wonder if this was the Yellow Submarine, because it goes through time. That's Moby Dick. That's actually in the submarine movie. And this is them over the rainbow. And maybe looking at the same stuff. And there's Picard. It talks about in First Contact. Put that meme in here. which ties to that, mean that ties to that. All of this stuff is tied together. It activates something in us when we do it. This is Captain Kirk and Uhura, first interracial kiss on primetime television. All right. Uhura, Nichelle Nichols, is the first black woman to be an officer on primetime television, the first woman to be an officer on primetime television. She made history. She's important. The Beatles saw this kiss, and they created this song called Blackbird. That song is about her. Supposedly, McCartney died in a car crash. And people wonder if this is a clone, or they just substituted him in, or maybe we just misremember things like the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect seems to be real. People remember a different history. Time change may be possible. So if the remote viewers can see something that's going to happen, and they send people to stop, like let's say there's a terrorist on the East Coast, but they see that in the future, they send the military to intercept, that no longer happens. We change time. Yes, ma'am?
Just going back to the Beatles and the Yellow Submarine.
Yep.
I've been doing research on John Lennon that he had contact
Mm-hmm.
with alien.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was, I want to say it was back the Yellow Submarine. I was thinking maybe it had something to do with him and that created this, or how did he create this?
Well, I may connect that a little better here in a second, but I think you're thinking right. But there's something weird about all of the Beatles. They were pretty successful, and I got a theory about them too. Do we remember what we remember? Do we see what we see? Our consciousness can change things. We can misremember history. The presence of atoms influence other atoms. I don't know how to get to this because it suggests that atoms are conscious entities. If a particle decays, somehow it's communicated to all the other particles that you don't have to decay because I've already done it. And so they keep their timestamp in order. That's why they don't all just erupt all at the same time. There's some kind of communication going on, and it's been measured. Consciousness guy, Masamoto, discovered that if you think or emote into a water, if you channel energy into a water, you can change the molecular structure of it, and when it freezes, it has a different pattern if it's angry, or you're loving, or you're kind. And in that book, Real Magic, they show experiments where they do that with tea and chocolate, and people can be given chocolate or tea that's healing, and they can have a good positive effect. They did triple blind studies on this. It's like people that believe that this is possible got better results than the people who did not believe this was possible. It didn't matter if they got the good chocolate or the bad chocolate with the healers, with one difference. If they got the chocolate that was actually prayed over or channeled with good energy, the effect was like 10 times better than just the chocolate that was regular, no prayer. But the people that didn't believe didn't get benefit at all on either. There's something interesting about that. If you put sand on a plate and you put a sound to it, you get frequencies and patterns that come out of the frequencies. They're consistent. You play an A sharp on the sand, you get the symbol for A sharp. The double slit experiment shows that we can change, or when we observe this pattern, when we collapse it into a particle or wave, we do it retrocausality-wise. Right? So the scientists have measured this. There's no mistaking. If the light came from a star a million light years away, it remains what it is until someone sees it. The moment someone sees it, it collapses, it becomes the thing, which means it became that thing a million years ago. Now, this is just me. I'm going to give you something to think about. I've told you that they can tell you what you've decided 80 milliseconds to 10 whole seconds before you've decided it. I call BS. Every single one of you knows I'm experiencing time in real time. That's your experience of it. What if we decide in real time and the decision is retrocausality, and so it just looks like it was made in the past because time doesn't exist. These are some time crystals. They've measured energy oscillating in this to suggest that information is going forwards and backwards in time, and it passes us in these crystals in the present. And if remote viewing is real and this is real, the future informs the past as much as the past informs the future. Let me say this another way. Let's say that there's a good place in the future. There's a utopia. There's God. I don't know how to label it, but there's a good place. They're not going to let us screw it up. If there's to be a nuclear war, and there's evidence that we probably would have had one in the 1960s, but the UFOs came back and turned those nuclear missiles off, what if they know our future, our past, and they're keeping us in our lane so that we don't mess it up? I think that's room for hope. They're not going to let us destroy ourselves. Doesn't mean they're not going to let us die because there's no death. They catch us somehow, or we go through the tunnel and this stuff is all connected, and I don't know how to understand it or interpret it at all. I just know and I believe there's something greater waiting for us. This is a virus. Kind of looks like a spaceship, doesn't it? This is the inside of a cell. This is the same picture in a nursing school right now. It looks just like the one from high school, except AI has mapped out twice as much of the functional artifacts, and there's twice as much functional artifacts in cells that we had never even anticipated, and only AI looking at living cells can find this stuff. There's invisible stuff in the cells. There's this theory called a shadow biome. We may have invisible stuff around us all the time and we can't see it because we can't see all of reality. We see 4% of the visible universe. 96% is invisible to us. Dark energy, dark matter, shadow biome. What we do see gets mapped out, and it has a particular pattern, and the galaxies look just like your brain cells. They have the same pattern. If you don't believe that there's more to consciousness than human consciousness is not just it, this is the first place that I would start for evidence that there's stuff going on. Fungus have been measured to have 50 word vocabularies. This particular shroom or whatever it is will catch onto an ant, hijack the ant, run it up a tree, the ant dies, and it grows and it releases force. It hijacks the ant. The ant's not driving itself. This creature must have some ability to tap into that system, and it knows what to do, right? It's a program, but it may not just be a simple program. It may be consciousness itself. Here's the link to the mushrooms have 50 language. This mouse, there's a toxoplasma. There's another thing that gets into the mouse brain, and it hijacks the mouse and runs it to the cat because it wants the cat to eat the mouse, because the organism in the mouse needs the cat for the next part of its reproductive cycle.
And it can affect humans too.
I'm sorry?
And it can affect humans too.
It can.
Yeah.
It may make us more engage in more risky behavior if you have this thing. Yes, ma'am.
The cat looks like it was gonna eat it.
I thought they looked like friends, but you may be right. Maybe it was going to eat it. There's a new study that says that we can make fat rats skinny by irradiating them and giving them the fecal transplant from the skinny mouse. And once the biome gets that biology, it gets skinny. And you can do it the other way around. It's been shown to happen in human in one incident. One woman had an intestinal cancer. They had to operate on her. They irradiated her. They gave her a transplant from a family member that was always overweight. And this skinny woman became overweight. And there was nothing she could do to stop the weight. She changed her diet, she started exercising, and she still gained weight. They've shown that they can reduce the age of mice by giving young transplants to the older ones sufficiently enough to reverse dementia. We are not what we think we are. And the biome does affect us just as much as psychology. Bugs may have feelings, per the scientists. They measured flies, and their anxiety goes up when they are bouncing against the window and they see a bunch of dead flies on the sill. They care about their well-being and others. Bees can tell you precisely where they found the flowers. Mathematically, they go and they transmit that information to their, and other people go and they find it. That's pretty miraculous, I think. Plants talk to other plants. They even make sounds, and with a microphone you can hear them. And so these plants can send nutrients to the people around them, and they recognize their young, and so if there's a drought, they will send nutrients to their young before they send it to their neighbors. In a forest, when there's a new seedling, the trees around the seedling will move their arms so that the sunlight reaches them. Yes, ma'am?
Never said this in public, only to a couple of my siblings. But when you said plants make sound,
Yes.
there's, you know the saying, take time to smell the roses?
Yes.
There's more to flowers, because flowers you can also hear.
Yes.
They're very chatty.
Yes.
Because I had an experience in California where I was working at this high school, and all of a sudden, during the spring, I would drive up park and I would think, oh my God, all the flowers are out now, it looks so beautiful. And then I get out of my vehicle, nervous talking about this, because like I said, I've never shared it in public. I get out of my vehicle, to go into the building, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm hearing all this chatter from the flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, what is going on? Like, and then it's like, okay, whatever, right? But then the next day or the following day or whatever, it happens again.
Mm-hmm.
And then so now I'm like getting there, saying hi, flower, in my head, I'm telling them, good morning, flowers, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Or when I would leave, see you later, tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. But to me, there's more than two flowers. I think
There's more going on. I'm going to give you two more examples of that right now. Just because you did this, it wasn't on my radar to do. People who are depressed are encouraged to go walking in nature. Nature helps alleviate depression. I would suggest to you it's because nature has a particular sound that we don't really register, but it's comforting, as opposed to the city soundscape has been demonstrated over and over to stress human beings. Nature is healing, our soundscape is not. But to that effect, I can't have a live Christmas tree in my house because I hear screaming tree. So, as long as you're adding water, that tree suffers because its death is prolonged. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Speak up a little,
Long
please.
time ago, when I was like 4 years old, all the way to 8 years old, I was talking to a tree. I was like, hello.
I talked to a tree too when I was 4. I don't know if it talked back to me, but I do remember talking to trees. And I love squirrels.
I got a yes. Well, definitely, plants and trees talk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I I heard them, like the palm trees, they talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. But I'm curious about what you were talking about, the chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, what I understood before I left to the bathroom with my little boy. So, a set of chocolates were blessed by someone, and then and the other ones were flat. They didn't have any energy. They were not energized with healing energy. And they provide those chocolates. So what happened? I mean, the people that taste the chocolates, that they were energized and they didn't know about it, got better.
They got better.
They got better.
Yes.
And what happened to the people that they thought that they got the good chocolates and they just got the regular ones? They got better too.
The ones that believed in the efficacy of that idea got better a little bit. The ones that did not believe did not get better.
So who didn't get better?
The people who don't believe in metaphysics or spirituality did not improve.
Even with
Even with the chocolate
the
that was
energetic
blessed.
chocolate.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
In that study, that doesn't mean that they can't be made well.
Right.
But if you have free will and you can consciously block something, that would make sense to me why you wouldn't get a remedy. If you don't believe in placebos, you may not get it. If you don't believe in placebos, you may not even get benefit from a real medicine. And that there's evidence that some medicines will not work for all people, and we don't know why. Yes?
I want to go back to plants.
Okay.
I do a lot of gardening nowadays, and I feel plants are very uninvestigated.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they're alive. I've communicated with them just by using my hands and placing it on leaves, and I've honestly healed dying plants with different methods.
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to comment is going back to what you said earlier on how we perceive things, that we might perceive things that, we see things like I see that board, it's at like 20 feet away from me, and there's this empty space between 20 feet. Going back to the plants don't have eyes, but they sense when things are near.
They do.
So I want to make a connection between the plants and the human, right? Humans, they say they have 5, 6 senses or whatever it may be. I think that may be like we may be limiting ourselves on the number of senses we truly have.
Sure.
And that's mainly what I have to say. What if there's more sensories to the human body as there's more sensories?
I believe there is. There's this thing you can Google. There's a way to teach people who are blind to see using ultrasound or echolocation. They make a noise with their mouth and their ears can map out the thing. And what if plants are making noise, can they also detect that frequency coming back, and they're somehow able to map out their environment? That's just something that came to my head right away, but it's just something to explore. This guy here at Baxter back in the 70s was the first guy to suggest that how we treat plants would affect their growth or well-being. And so, like, if you yelled at a plant, it could die, it killed it. Or if you talked nicely to it, it did well. Well, he didn't even have to talk to it. All he had to do was think, and it had the same effect. And he hooked them up to lie detectors, and the lie detectors would have a response like, I'm going to burn you with a match, and then the thing would go, and it would like stress out. But it got used to him. If he didn't ever burn the thing, the plant would stop reacting to him. Interesting, he could take the cells from the plant and put it in a petri dish and hook the lie detector up, threaten the plant, or actually burn the plant, and the cells in the dish responded to the plant being harmed, and so did people. I'm about to go a lot faster because we're running out of time. I recommend The Heart's Code. It's a book that talks about how heart transplants led to other people having experiences. So if someone was murdered, the person that got the heart ended up solving a murder case because of having the memories from the donor. Divided Mind talks about this stuff too. Sharks are usually considered like just fish and stupid. This lady removed the the hooks from all their mouths, and they came back and they gave her kindness. They showed her kindness because she did them a kindness. Maybe we should show all animals more kindness. This octopus has evidence of PTSD. It would eject ink in a nightmare. We think it was dreaming and having a PTSD response. Dolphins have language. If you take this dolphin from the Atlantic and put him in the Pacific, he can't communicate with them because they have their own language. This is the smartest dog in the world. He knows more, he knows like 1,022 words, and he's able to learn new ones. They can be sent to a room to get a new object he's never seen before. Coco the gorilla is probably the best example of language. She responded to Robin Williams. She knew who Mr. Rogers was. He came to visit her and he'd take off her shoes. These fellas learned how to wash their fruit, and they think that they learned it through a psychic process, which Sheldrake talked about, but they've also picked up hunting, maybe by watching us. This is the morphogenic field that may explain why the monkeys did it. After a certain number of people do it, it just becomes prevalent in the mind stream. I'm going to run through this. This is the Global Consciousness Project, where scientists use random number generators to show that, like 9/11, everyone in the world focused on 9/11. And all the random number generators around the world stopped being random during this, like 15 minutes before the event. Same with Fukushima. There's evidence that something is happening 15 minutes prior to social events that can be recorded, and we don't know why. But they're making a statement saying that we are globally connected. The collective unconscious is a real thing, and it affects machines. This was a painting that was for this album cover that the person who created it lived in New York, says, I just had this dream, let's give you this album cover. He predicted it. This is the face on Mars. It was a comic strip in the 1950s that looks just like the face on Mars that NASA took a picture of. Is this evidence of remote viewing? Accidental remote viewing may be a thing. This is also a sculpture that was made in 1947. The face on Mars is what it's called. The Wreck of the Titan was a book, fiction, written prior to the sinking of the Titanic. It has everything in there but DiCaprio. This album cover by, I forget, somebody with music, help me. Yeah, thank you. She told their band not to go on this flight because she dreamed the plane was going to crash. She stayed, the band members went, some of them died. They were on fire in the original album cover. This book by Dean Koontz predicted everything about COVID, where it came from in a Wuhan lab prior to it happening. Eureka is a Edgar Allan Poe, and he figured out some science stuff that is true about astronomy today that no one knew at the time that he wrote it. But he wrote this book where 4 people on a boat go down. It's fiction. And one of the guys, Richard Parker, gets eaten at cannibalism because he drew the short straw. In real life, 46 years later, a ship went down, 4 people survived, and Richard Parker got eaten. I don't know about you, but if my name's Richard Parker, I'm not getting on a boat. The Daemon by Anthony Peake talks about this stuff, and I think we'll close it out here, and you can have the references if you want. Do we have time for questions, or are we done?
Time for questions.
All right, questions. That was a lot of information. Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to thank you for taking your time. Your presentation has been absolutely incredible. It's had me at the edge of my seat the entire time I'm out here. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
A brief question following up on a topic that you brought up earlier was the soft disclosure, where popular media has been kind of acclimating us to the idea of extraterrestrials and other concepts that are not generally accepted by most people. sense, I'm curious why would the media choose to use soft disclosure to help us be more familiar with these ideas? Meanwhile, the U.S. government, for the past 80 plus years, has vehemently denied over and over the existence of many of these concepts that are being brought up in movies, TV, and why do you think there's such a stark difference in this?
I think there's levels to this. I think most of the media outlets don't have a clue that they're being used. All right, but Bryce Sable, who wrote the TV series Dark Skies, and it's kind of like Mulder back in the 50s. He said he was at a party and an FBI agent came up to him and said, "I want you to use this formula inside your show." And so there's evidence that even though the government is doing it, they're twofold. They're doing it in a certain way that has certain outcomes to progresses at a certain time frame. And so, like, if you go to SG-1, the Stargate series, the Air Force was involved in that the whole way, and they participated with the science and the development, and they even did cameos. The officers did cameos in the show, and so they may be mapping it out. And I would suggest to you that also the Men in Black and the government is so harsh on this is partly because there is a timeline. They have to follow it precisely for the optimum outcome. So, like, if we go too fast, we don't get everybody there. If we go too slow, we don't get everyone there. But if we just kind of trust the process and we all level up at the right time and place, I think it benefits humanity and the world to a greater degree. And that future society is keeping us on schedule. And I think the Men in Black are also time travelers that are part of this. Or our consciousness is connected to all of that, and somehow they intervene psychically, or they're communicating out of subconscious. 90% of our interaction is subconscious. If you go to a club and you find someone that you like instantly, that's probably a subconscious pattern, meaning that a childhood pattern was illuminated in something they're doing that reminds you of home, and that's why you want to connect with them. I hope that helps.
I'll just say I find it ironic that you mentioned that you use the club as a reference, as an example, because I work as a club DJ.
Oh, wow.
Like I said, you picked up on my energy. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Thank you.
You have a question, Tyler?
I put a comment back when you were talking about a dog that had like almost 2,000 words.
Yeah, 1,022, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it reminded me back in the day, like maybe in the year 2000, when I was taking my teacher credential courses. I was going towards bilingual teacher certification, so I took language acquisition classes. And in that class, I don't know how it came up, but I said, yeah, my dog, the Chihuahua that I had back then, my dog is bilingual. And then they laughed.
Well, I'm laughing because you don't have a real dog in a Chihuahua.
Hey, I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Anyway, they laughed, and I said, I'm serious. My dog is bilingual. She responds to when I say let's go, or when I say vámonos, when I say it in Spanish. She responds to both, and other things, right?
Yeah.
But I use that as an example. And like, I just remember that people laughed at, and there's those are, people that
Did they
were
laugh
also
maliciously or
teachers.
did they laugh maliciously or good-naturedly? Because it could have been a little of both.
Yeah, probably both.
Yeah.
Even the instructor too laughed, and I just told them that I truly believe that I was right, that animals can be bilingual.
Animals can be
And I
bilingual.
knew that mine was.
Yep. And German Shepherds are frequently taught in German, and so they won't respond to English if their command structure is in German. Yeah. I think you had a question again. Yeah.
At the beginning, I agree with this side. It controls like the map and
Yeah, the left side has math and language. That's its prominent feature. You're paying attention, you're awesome. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Going back on the comments of like a soft disclosure,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I kind of have this idea that there might be this old world kind of ruling, dying out, and this new world of like how life should be continuing on. I feel like that's kind of being apparent through the media, but maybe that's just like
Yeah,
an observation.
that's a hard one to sort, isn't it? Because there's evidence for ancient civilizations and ancient apocalypses. I think the evidence for that is overwhelming. And does that mean that we messed up and had to start over? Or we fell? Or did we blow it up? There's evidence that life came from Mars. I mean, there's a scientific article that life actually transferred from Mars. But there's actually another theory that we relocated from Mars, and some of that was from the remote viewing thing where they found evidence that people left Mars and we were supposed to go back and get other folks. And I think that was transmitted in the movie too. I don't remember the name of it, but Daniel and I were speaking about it. It was and Kilmer was in it.
That suggests that Earth is kind of like a receiving planet from Mars.
Maybe, and that's just if we leave it in the physical realm. If we talk about it from the metaphysical aspect, and that this is a collective program or game in which we all came here to participate in a movie or a learning experience, and we chose amnesia. And if we chose amnesia, one of the reasons they would be so heavy on people that are starting to wake up is they don't want you to wake up before the surprise party at the end. It's speculative, but it helps me sleep at night. Did that help?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's good. That's good.
Dan?
So I know that you've gone through several different things in your presentation. There are also other sections that you haven't even really gotten to touch upon, but maybe you could share just what those sections really are about, and maybe you have a lot that in the conclusion you kind of tie all of these things together. What are some of the other sections as far as maybe what topics and things that they get into?
Well,
that people, that want to follow up and that you can share about to,
Sure.
Continue.
I'll try, and please note that this is not a disparagement. I don't have a script on this. I have all of this in my head. I'm knowledgeable about it, and so there's variance every time I do the presentation. But I'm also easily distracted, and so questions kind of sideline my brain, and I'm tangential, and I went around as best I could. And so somewhere in here, I should have mentioned that Carl Jung, who was really big on archetypes, and he's my favorite psychiatrist, he wrote a UFO book back in the 50s. No, so this is probably the beginning of 60s, but he collected the information during the 50s. And he created this premise that it was an archetypal invention that man had created tools, nuclear weapons, that were so powerful that we were going to wipe ourselves out, and we thought we needed a spiritual or wise person to come in because we are too foolish to play with these matches. And he said that psychically we created the UFOs to replace Jesus in the modern times. He also says that if you look at societies, the more materialistic they get, the more UFOs they encounter. And that's an interesting thing in itself too. What he ended that book with is we then have to ask ourselves why UFOs show up on radar if they're archetypes. Because archetypes shouldn't be influencing radar at all. And so he's suggesting that this may be a lot more complicated than it is. And if we can make our thoughts real, like Friar Tuck's or Roxy actually talking in my ear. But it's interesting because it's also in the left ear that I hear her. And some of the people I know who are mediums, who have spirit guides, they talked about the left ear thing. And there's some people in the UFO world that were supposedly taught to navigate ships. They were put on the ships, and they said that I felt like someone was behind me, and they talked to me in my left ear. People in near-death experiences who are watching their life review would have their spirit guide talking to them in their left ear. There's some parallels here that I can't escape. And if you connect Dolores Cannon and Michael Newton, Dolores Cannon wrote the Convoluted Universe series. She got her information doing hypnosis on people, and she would talk to people, their core spirit, and she would say that when she'd asked why the aliens are abducting them, they said that we had a soul contract. Now I'm curious if that soul contract was before they were living, or every time I meet an alien and I make eye contact, we're having a telepathic communication, and our subconscious figured things out before I was consciously aware of it, and my subconscious agreed to the experiment, even though I didn't consciously do it. And so they could say that they literally had permission to do it from my subconscious. So that confuses me too, but it's a potentiality that we have to kind of explore. We don't know enough about our unconscious. People hook up unconsciously. You'll have people with serial relationships where they were abused. They magically go and find people that will abuse them. Well, it's not because they're broken, it's because their brain is habituated to find people like that. And they don't even have to ask, are you going to abuse me? But they'll ask me in therapy, well, abused? Right on my forehead. It's almost like magic that we do this. And then so Michael Newton, if you read his book, Journey of Souls, he found people having past life experiences and experiences in between lives. And both he, Dolores Cannon, and Edgar Cayce says we have incarnated on other planets. And so there's correlation in the data, and they're all coming from different places. And I don't think they're making it up. So, any other questions? Do we have time? Oh, yeah.
More on Dolores Cannon. I read her book, Three Waves of Volunteers, and the three waves of volunteers, and it speaks about people who did the hypnotherapy with the regression, and saying that, yeah, they died at a different time and they're here for a purpose.
Yeah.
That purpose is just to elevate the entirety of human consciousness.
Yeah. I'm familiar with that. The first wave didn't want to be here.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting in itself, because how many people do you have to or in fact, I should say it like this, how many people have to come forward with these type of things before we can actually say that there's some historical truth behind it?
There's some change coming. I think we're going to, I think she had to come back. Yes.
The recent government investigation, you know, the hearings and so forth, is that part of this timeline? You know, we're going to gradually say, okay, it's all right now to acknowledge that UFOs are real.
Well, that part has already happened, that UFOs are real. But your question's a good. Everything I watched in those hearings, I've not learned any new material. I think that is to educate the folks that are not on the same page that you and I are. Is it to bring us to a place where it's okay, or are they going to scare us? I'm not confident I know that one yet. Right, but they could go either way. But some of them want us to be afraid to keep the control, and I don't know. The team players, it's a mess. That's probably.
Well, they acknowledged, they showed us the video clips of the Navy pilots.
Yeah, but there's more to it. They didn't show us all. They just showed us what they want us to know.
Just a tantalizing little clip.
Yeah, but I think there's more coming, for sure.
But it just seems recent that all of a sudden, you know, after poo-pooing it for millions of years, well, not millions, but 80 years, you know, that suddenly the government is saying, or acknowledging, okay, we need to talk about, we need to investigate.
Yeah, we are definitely in world change time. We can't keep treating the planet the way we are, or we won't be here. We can't keep warring with each other, we won't be here. And we got to find a new way of valuing human life, because when AI and robots take over and there's no work, how do you measure the value of a human being? It's not in productivity. That's the worst measure ever. Yeah, so we got some changes coming. George, thank you all.
Thank you all so much. Give a round of applause. If I could have everybody go to the back for our photo, and then the conversation can still continue. We're going to go to Barrel House after this. It's right across the street from the library on Tourist. I think John is still going to be there, and we're going to continue the discussion there because we have to leave the library about a certain time. But if everybody go to the back, and thank you all so much for coming. Get ready for the group photo. Thank you all so much.
If you liked this video, be sure to check out our other content and get connected on our page and social media sites. Every day, new discoveries are being made all across the world and beyond, so let's work together to find out what's next. And remember, we won't know if we don't go. I'll see you in the vortex.